before we continue, just a large round of applause for Matt Britton, who is one of the leading minds when it comes to explaining AI and marketing. So Matt, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks. I haven't even done anything yet.
Well, you did write a book called Generation AI, and speak to the audience about some of the things that are in there that affect marketing, especially for these brands and these industries.
Well, I wrote my first book 10 years ago, and it was called Youth Nation. And I was inspired to write Youth Nation because at that point, for the first time, youth culture was no longer counterculture. Meaning, before the age of social media, in order for young voices to be heard, they had to protest. They had to go to places like Woodstock, stand up at town squares, because it was the big mainstream media that controlled the narrative. And now all of a sudden you had YouTube and you had Instagram, you had these tools that allow people to have a voice. And I called it Youth Nation because for the first time, brands were being built on the sidewalk, not the boardrooms, right? And they could dictate popular discourse and the way that society and culture evolved over time. And now we're seeing even a bigger shift here in 2025, 2026 around AI. And as somebody who spends a lot of time with hands-on keyboard building an AI, my eyes opened up that this is the next big shift. And with this next big shift is going to be a new generation, Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha, currently age 0 to 15, is never going to know a world without AI, never going to know a world without a technology you can speak to like a human. And it was based on that I got motivated to write the book, Generation AI.
So when you're talking about this generation that's coming, that are consumers themselves, that have never not known AI, how are we as consumers? So take me, for example, completely a consumer buying things left, right, willy-nilly. How am I being influenced by AI, either knowingly or unknowingly?
Well, I think what you're hearing at CES this year is kind of the topic du jour, and I've been coming for 25 years to CES, and throughout that timeline, there's been topics that people have focused on. I remember when streaming was a big thing, 3D TVs, even when the iPhone first came out, there was a huge boom around iPhone accessories. Now, what you're seeing is every company put AI at the center of their strategy. And I think this year is the year where brands are going to really have to prove its value. The investment cycle has already started. The CapEx cycle has started. So you may have only very sparingly been impacted by it to date. Now, some will tell you AI has been around for a very long time. When Netflix tells you the next show to watch, or Spotify tells you the next song to listen to, that is machine learning. That is AI. But now what ChatGPT has done, and everything else that came after it, is it put the power of AI in every consumer's hands, made it easy to understand, make it accessible, and that's what's really going to change the world moving forward.
Okay, so for brands, because this interests me, right? In sports, as we know, back in the days of the doping, it's the athletes were staying ahead of the testers. The drug makers were staying ahead of the testers. They were making, like, Balco was ahead of all of the testing. How do brands stay ahead of the consumers? If the consumers are already using AI, how do the brands then use the AI to kind of get ahead and market to these people like myself?
So I think it's about delivering on expectations. With evolution of technology becomes the evolution of expectations. For example, I think consumers are going to increasingly expect and demand hyper-personalization, for example. So right now, most companies, when they send out email newsletters, it's one to many. It's the same email going out to 1 million people. I don't think that's going to be acceptable to the new consumer. The consumer is going to expect that a brand knows them, has the context, has their preferences, has their images, and they're going to be treated as an audience of one. I think brands are going to be expected to move faster. Customer experience is going to be more seamless. So I think there's going to be a lot of ways that consumers are going to drive new expectations that brands are going to have to deliver on.
Okay, well, I'm a big hip hop head, and Biggie had that line. I'm not only a client, I'm the player president. You just happen to be the CEO of Suzy. So how is Suzy staying ahead of, or actually not even staying ahead? How is Suzy implementing what you just said?
Yeah, I look at Suzy and this trajectory as kind of a case study of disruption. We spent 7 years building a market research tool and a survey tool, which seemingly overnight became commoditized. Because in the world of software, and this is another thing we can get into, there's no longer the barrier to entry that there used to be in terms of creating software. These vibe coding tools like Cursor and Lovable allow, teams of one to create software that in the past you needed tens of millions of dollars of capital and tremendous resources to create. So I was faced with, what am I going to do about it? We've raised over $100 million. We have to reinvent. And to me, while the layer of tooling has become commoditized, the areas that haven't become commoditized and arguably are the moats in the age of AI are around data. So we are really leaning into the data that we've amassed on behalf of our customers, which is consumer insight, consumer research data, and what to do with it. And what we're trying to do with the data is not just output charts and graphs, but the things that companies and brands really need from that data, which are stories that they can use to drive decisions within the enterprise, prototypes so they can test new packaging, new product designs, not just charts and graphs, but actually use generative AI to create these new prototypes. And over time, allow brands to use their customer data to actually help drive decisions in terms of what to do next.
What do you mean by stories? Like that sounds kind of generic and broad, but define stories in how Suzy is using it and how brands need to adapt.
So the reason that brands conduct consumer research is to make a decision. And they want to make a data-driven decision to cover their ass, to make sure they're not making the wrong decision, and to be able to move ahead with conviction. We've had brands that have used Suzy to test Super Bowl spots, to actually give them conviction, opening up new factories or launching new products at, end cap displays in Walmart. And in order for them to do that, they need to know that those things are going to be successful. And while you never truly know, if you're talking to the right consumers, you can put the odds in your favor. However, in the past, in order for brands to use that research to drive decision, they would use charts and graphs. And that's not how I think the new consumer and the new enterprise worker wants to consume data. They want visuals, they want infographics, they want stories that are told so they can understand, right? What we're doing with Suzy is instead of outputting just charts and graphs, we are now outputting videos. We're outputting infographics. We're outputting on-brand imagery that allows whoever's to conduct the research to more easily drive change within the organization, hence making consumer research, consumer data far more powerful.
In my business of television, we fear AI because it's replacing the actual living person that's delivering the news and where stories are coming from. So we have to understand it and at the same time kind of fight against it. If you're a brand, an industry, a company, what happens if they're not doing what you're talking about? What happens if they're not adopting this style of thinking or using AI as a marketing tool to stay ahead of the consumer? What happens to that brand, that industry, that company?
So let me zoom in a little bit beyond brand to individual, right? I'm talking to a bunch of professionals who are at CES right now on stage because they want to further their careers. They want to develop in their careers. And everyone here on this patio and everyone here in Las Vegas right now has risk, right? They have risk because if part of their job is walking into work every day and waiting to be told what to do, by nature, that means your job is deterministic in sense. And actions and tasks that are deterministic is actually the automation that AI can power the best right now. Which means, in order for us to future-proof ourselves, we need to go beyond these deterministic tasks. We can't make our job about waiting to be told what to do. We need to take initiative. And that leans into a completely new skill set of creativity, of problem solving, of critical thinking. And if you have that framework, then you're going to want stories to drive change. Because in order for you to take initiative and drive change, you need data behind it. But I think everybody listening, either here or on the web that's watching this, needs to think about what they do every day. How are they spending their time moving forward? Are they doing the same thing every day? Are they waiting for the boss to tell them what to do? Because if they are, you're going to get a surprising email one day that you no longer have a job. You just will, and it's only going to continue over time. But conversely, if you can future-proof yourself, if you can adopt these tools, you're going to find yourself on the right side of it. And I've spent the last year traveling all over the world, and people are really freaked out about this new change. But at the same time, it creates risk. it creates unprecedented opportunity for all of us.
Okay, so you've kind of outlined the fear part of the risk of basically becoming obsolete, right? You are the worker on the assembly line that gets replaced by the more efficient robot, and now that's just magnified with how fast and how powerful the AI is. What's the benefit? How, when you're saying future-proof yourself, great, but what does that look like?
I think what it looks like is the world is moving faster than ever before. And companies, just like my company, Suzy, need to reinvent themselves. That you can't continue to go about business as usual. And in order for a company to reinvent themselves, you need people who are taking initiative within the organization. And the way you can take an initiative right now is by using these tools, is by using the power of these tools to do things that in the past you would have needed a whole infrastructure or new departments to be able to execute on your behalf.
Wait, I say rank and file, but you typically think of this as a directive from the C-suite on down. You're empowering basically the people on the work floor. And
yeah, we are.
So what does that look like? Because if I'm a worker and you're basically saying use AI to future-proof myself, how does that not necessarily run contrary to what the company wants? How do I know that I'm moving in the right direction? Yeah. How do I make use of this AI so I'm not getting that email?
So I think first and foremost, you're starting to see a lot of big companies take a step in this direction. So Amazon, for example, announced that they, in the fourth quarter, were laying off 10,000 people. And Andy Jassy, the CEO, was very clear in that the people they were laying off were people who were essentially layering the organization. There were just too many people that were just moving data from one place to the other. And what I think you're going to start to see a lot of companies want to do is flatten the organization. You're also going to see a lot of companies eliminate centers of excellence. So let me give you an example. We sell consumer research. And in the past, the people we would sell consumer research to were consumer insights departments. And what would happen in the organization is the brand manager of Tide wanted to test different types of packaging for Tide to roll out in retail. They would go to the insights department, and the insights department would conduct research and give it back to the brand so they can make a decision. But now what we're starting to see is companies are eliminating that central function, that central insights function, and instead trying to empower the brand manager with tools so they can do the research themselves, thus allowing them to move more quickly and more efficiently. Why couldn't that happen in the past? Because in the past, in order for you to be able to conduct research effectively, you need to know how to operate all the knobs and dials of consumer research, because it's a very sophisticated practice with all these methodologies that people learn in school. But increasingly, research methodology is going beneath the hood, meaning you, as a brand marketer, could just say, this is who I want to target, this is what I'm trying to learn, and the AI will decide the audience and the methodology for you. Meaning the problem you want to solve is now far more important than how to solve the problem. And that same dynamic exists in almost any field. If you're a graphic designer, you used to need to know how to operate the knobs and dials of Adobe. But now Adobe itself has Adobe Firefly, and you just have to know what you want to create. So we had a 2-decade run of the peak of the knowledge economy. If you were able to ingest knowledge and regurgitate it. If you had the knowledge of how to write a contract and be a lawyer, or how to write code and be an engineer, or how to be a radiologist and read an x-ray, right, you would thrive in a knowledge economy. But moving forward, I think we're entering the end of the knowledge economy. And it's less about having the knowledge to do the thing, and more about having the thinking-based skill set and identifying what the thing is that needs to be done. And if you, no matter what level you are at in the organization, focus on that, what's the core problem I need to solve to move the business forward and go deep in using AI to do that, you will be incredibly effective in future-proofing yourself.
You've just mentioned Amazon laying off 10,000 people, and companies are going to have to do massive shakeups to get to that flattened level.
Yes.
So how then do you as an individual position yourself? Yep. And as a company, how do you know who to look for? How does, for example, let's just keep it brass tacks. How do you and Suzy identify that person that is able to use the AI to be a creative thinker and not just the, what do you want me to do today, boss?
So let me start with the first part of your question, is like, what should you do? So one thing I've realized in working with a lot of big companies is that the employees within those organizations, while they're being told to be AI first, actually are very much encumbered in doing so, because it's not like they can download any AI tool they want and start uploading customer data, because there's data privacy, security, legal concerns that inhibit them from doing that. So in the absence of them being able to do whatever they need to do at work to adopt AI, I'm telling them, build AI projects at home where you are unencumbered, meaning build a tutoring tool for your 8-year-old for math, right? Do what I did, which is I built my own AI health bot where I took 25 years of personal health information and actually created my own health bot. And the first question I asked it was, if I'm going to die in 5 years, what's the most likely cause? And the answer freaked me out because it was just built on my data. But going through that process of identifying the problem that needs to be solved, gathering the data that can help me solve the problem, and having an idea of some type of application taught me how to take that same skill set into work. And I think everybody needs to be doing this, because you will be, tied up at work and your ability to do it. But at home, you can do whatever you want with your personal data, and that's where you need to start. The people that do that are the people who I want to hire. Right? So I want people that are taking the initiative to understand it, build on their own. I don't want to hire anyone right now that hasn't built at least something in AI. And I don't mean asking ChatGPT for the best lasagna recipe, right? I mean actually building some type of application, because those are the people that I think are going to have the right mental framework and skill set to really be able to drive change in my organization.
So that's for the individual, but now how do you as a company identify that person? You said you want them.
Very
hard.
I
want to be that person, but how do you identify them? Because brands and companies are looking for these unicorns.
Yep.
So how do they do it? How do you pinpoint that's the person?
Well, first of all, those people might already be working for you, and they might just be buried in your org. So at my company, we had a software team of 80 people, and we were going nowhere in terms of AI innovation. And then I started to build on my own, and I started to just dive deep in the organization. And I found the ragtag team of like 5 to 7 people. Frankly, I didn't even know their names, right? Because they were kind of buried in my org. But they were the ones that actually understood and were doing the building. And I created a SWAT team. I extracted them from the core R&D team and worked with them myself to build our new product. And then at our last board dinner, one of my main investors, who's invested tens of millions of dollars in our company, said, I've never seen these people before. Who are they? And I'm like, to be honest with you, I didn't even know them 6 months ago, but they are the future of our business. And I think that's really emblematic on what's going to happen in a lot of organizations is it doesn't matter what your title is. If you're somebody that can prove that you can use this new powerful technology to move the business forward, if you are one of those people, speak loudly and proudly about it. But as a manager, you need to find and identify those people. And if they're not in your organization, you need to put yourself out there. But they are not easy to find because, again, the last 20 years has rewarded a completely different skill set and behavior.
In television, the great Don Ohlmeyer once said, the answer to all your questions is money. Why we do what we do, why we show you this story, why you're watching this particular thing is based off of money. Putting a dollar amount, if we're able to, on what happens for these individuals that become these unicorns and these companies that become leaner. What's the type of money or benefit, return on investment for finding these unicorns being these unicorns?
I think you can control your destiny. It's like if somebody knows how to build, if somebody has initiative, that they can command the tools, there's not one company here in Las Vegas right now that won't hire you. Right? So you can control your destiny versus letting the market control your destiny. And it's especially harder for people who are later in their careers. I've spoken to a lot of people who are in their 40s and their 50s that had, very high paying, successful, prominent jobs at big companies that all of a sudden find themselves without a job. And it's really hard to reinvent yourself that late in your career. That's one of the downsides of a new disruption coming in. And we saw it with the internet in the digital era. So I think don't wait. Try to get ahead of it now. Even if you think things are fine, they're probably not for you based upon how quickly this world is moving.
You mentioned your SWAT team, this elite brand or elite group of people that are now working for you. What is their task at Suzy?
To build stuff. To actually put hands on keyboard and build things. And people can build things now without being an engineer. So there's not many things that you can tell me that you want to build for you that I wouldn't be able to go back to my hotel room and actually build for you and have a prototype ready for you tomorrow morning. And I've never written a line of code in my life. right? So what does that mean? How do I do it? It's by focusing on the problem you want to solve, breaking it down into steps, going step by step. When you hit a step and you hit a snag, looking at every angle until you're able to accomplish it, and then going to the next step. And by you're at step 37, you look back, you're like, wow, these steps I can use for this, and this step I can use for this. And then slowly, you start to see what all the buzz is about. The people that talk about 99% of people that get on stages like this and talk about AI have no idea what they're talking about.
Say that again.
99% of people that talk about AI on stage have no idea what they're talking about. And the reason why is they've never built anything in AI. And until you've actually created things, you really don't know what you're talking about, and you really don't know what's possible. And it's just the analogy I always give is like a national park. I don't know if you've ever been to a national park before, but there's like the majority of people go to a national park and they'll just go to the gift shop, and then they'll go behind the gift shop and take a picture, a selfie of the scenic beauty, but they'll never really go to the woods, right? Then maybe 9% of people will go right behind the gift shop and walk on the paved path around the lake, right? So they'll at least move their body, but they're still in the paved path. And only 1% will go deep into the woods, right? And experience the real beauty of nature and waking up and hearing the birds chirp, right? And when you go into the woods, you're going down a trail and you don't know what's going to be out there. But when you get to where you want to get to, you're seeing things and experiencing things that other people won't. That is the perfect analogy for AI right now. 90% of people will use AI just to ask for a new lasagna recipe. Maybe 9% will build a cute little automation. But very few people will actually dive in to build things. And those are the people that are going to have the power and the influence in this next phase of business, I believe.
That's some heavy talk, man. I mentioned Biggie, but I might have to start saying the notorious MATT, because you're basically speaking with almost a strident tone that I'm an expert. This is what I see. This is what people aren't doing. This isn't what companies are doing. This is what you need to be doing. Why you? What makes you so sure that you can see what others haven't been able to?
Well, I can't predict the future, and everything I'm saying on stage right now might be completely wrong. The reason why I have conviction in my mind is I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. I've started and sold multiple companies. I've had many successes. I've also had a few failures. But in the case of AI, I've done the work. I've done the 25,000 hours of building. I've built applications personally. I've built applications for my organization. I've built applications for major brands. But I also have worked with the largest CMOs. I also run a podcast called Speed of Culture that's interviewed over 225 CMOs in the last 3 years. So I have a good understanding of what the business world wants right now. So I think it puts me in a unique position to prophesize about where things are going. And people can listen to me, people can't, that's totally fine, but this is what I believe, so I'm just speaking my truth.
No, I mean, I love it. I want to, first of all, round of applause for speaking your truth.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, having conviction is one thing, speaking with conviction is another, and you're doing both. So, as Suzy is positioned, as you work with different companies, as you consult and speak to different people, where is the gap or the disconnect where companies aren't hearing you or they're not seeing the prophecy that you're just laying out?
Well, many leaders at large companies just don't want to get fired. Let's be real. Like, if you are at a certain point in your career and you're working for a big company, you just want to kind of coast along until you retire. You don't want to deal with any of this shit, right? A lot of people just don't have to fire. But that trickles down to the organization, and that's where new incumbents will come in and first start nibbling at the ankles of these companies and one day swallow them. So I think if you're at a company like that, you should speak out. You should be a change maker and not be afraid to ruffle feathers. But in order for you to do that, you have to have the chops. And if you have the chops, I think you really dive in. If I were the board, right, who hires a CEO at a big company, I would be pushing my CEO on how AI adept they are, because it all starts at the top, right? And if the CEO really just thinks it's a parlor trick, that's going to transfer all the way down the org. And yes, they might be saying the right things in press interviews, but it really takes a transformation inside out, not outside in, to really drive this type of change in an organization.
So the idea of get off my lawn, we've done it this way, we are this brand, this is how we operate, this is our revenue, it's good for me. You're basically saying you're on borrowed time.
Right, and obviously it depends upon the category you're in. I run a software company, right? So we are bullseye of disruption. It's like change or you're going to no longer be relevant. If you are Nike or if you are Procter & Gamble and you sell consumer goods, you have a little bit longer window to change. You know, you have the shelf space at Target and Walmart. You have brands that people love. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to change fast, and even those companies are going to drive internal transformation, but you have a little bit longer of a window. But by nature of people being here at CES, they want to innovate, right? They care about what's next. And if you want to drive your career, right, and I'm more focused on driving your career than driving your business, because let's face it, somebody who is the brand manager of a toothpaste brand really doesn't care about going from 0.37% share to 0.38% share. No one's going to put that on their tombstone, right? You care about getting a promotion, moving to a new house, putting your kids through college, taking care of an aging parent, right? I want to empower people to be able to do that. And if you do that, your career is going to be better, and it'll trickle down and have a massive impact on the company that you're working at.
Okay, with the time we have remaining, walk me through a real-life example, if you can. Don't necessarily divulge the company's name that you worked with, but I am company X. You identify a problem. Walk us through the steps of taking company X from where they were to where you think they need to be.
So I'll just give you a couple examples of things I built for Suzy internally, so it's more applicable to everyone in the audience. We had a problem at our organization that our salespeople were not able to find the resources and assets they need to better, perform on their job, right? They didn't have case studies. They had a hard time finding the right data. Information was everywhere. We also had a problem in that we're a remote organization, and we had a hard time with our management evaluating our sales team. What are they really saying on calls with prospects and clients? Are they doing a good job? Are they mixing their numbers because our product isn't good? Or are they missing our numbers because they're not good? So I built an engine within our organization that started with one single data source, which is transcripts from calls. So we use a tool called Gong, which records every call that we have with customers and prospects. So at the beginning of a call, it says...
Wait a second. Did everybody hear what he said? Because they disrupted. Everybody got it?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So we record calls with customers and prospects. And once I started to dive into this, I found that we had 25,000 hours of customer call transcripts. Customers in the wild. Customers who loved us, customers who didn't. Customers who expanded, customers that churned. There's no better source of truth than 25,000 hours of calls with customers. And what I did is I built an engine that extracted all of those transcripts and put it into a model. And the output of the model was a variety of different applications. One of which is every time now a call with a customer or prospect is completed, it writes a summary of the call and gives a customer sentiment score on how happy the customer is with Suzy. If it's below a certain score, their salesperson's manager is alerted so we can intervene. These customer call transcripts drive our product roadmap, drive our content publishing schedule, and do a variety of different things in an automated fashion, all from that one single source of data. It essentially is the operating system for our company. So for a long time, brands are saying, I'm consumer-centric. This is the epitome of consumer centricity. We've operationalized it by building an AI-powered engine solely on what our customers say during the calls we have with them.
Wow. Okay. I'm pausing just for a moment to take all of that in, identifying a problem within your own company, using the AI available and the data that you already have stored to basically streamline and improve what your sales force was doing.
Yeah, and the management of the team. And I think a big unlock there is all this data fed into Slack, where our team already was. It's very hard to get people to adopt a new tool and change habits. So I was able to build a tool that piped directly into where they're already working, which is a big learning as well.
But this is fun for you. Like you're in this. How do regular companies and regular Joes and Janes, how do they identify, see what you just saw? And if they're not able to, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, I think the first step is identifying what your growth limiting factor is. What is the most important problem you want to solve in your business or your life? It all starts with that. Often when I talk on stage, have people come out to me, what tools should I use? And they're kind of missing the point because it really starts with identifying the problem. And that is the most important thing. Once you've identified that problem, you then have to figure out what is the data that I have access to that can help me build a tool that can help me solve that problem. So in the case of my problem of making my sales people more efficient, it was those customer call transcripts, and then having an idea of what an application would look like that would synthesize all that people could use, or you can use, to help solve the problem on an ongoing basis. And you can simply just go into ChatGPT and describe those things and say, give me step-by-step instruction on how to build this. Don't give me step 2 until I tell you step 1 is done. And if you just don't give up, and you spend 3 months on it, and you're at step 38, you're going to look back and be like, holy shit, I know so much more than everybody else about this.
Give me a soundbite for the people to leave with as we come to our end. What is the one takeaway with everything that you said, aside from not being obsolete and understanding the problem? What's the one takeaway, if anything, that you would want them to leave?
So, I mean, I don't really believe in fear mongering. I don't believe in sitting up here and being like, we're all going to lose our jobs or else, like, no, like, there is going to be change, but you could do something about it, right? And hopefully what I tried to unveil during our talk today is what you can do about it. But I think the key is just getting started. And again, the way you get started is figure out a problem you want to solve. And I do believe identifying a problem personally is a great place to start, because I can do whatever I want with Suzy's data because I'm the CEO of the company. But if you work at a large company, you're not going to be able to do that. And if you want to get started right away, figure out a problem or something you want to unlock in your personal life and go through that same step. And I think, like, for example, I built an agent for my mom who lives alone, is 75 years old, who is texting me all the time for her Netflix password. And I put in every password. I uploaded every manual of every appliance. And I said, before you ask me questions, do me a favor and just type into this first. The least technologically adept person you'll ever meet in your life now is getting value out of AI. So there's little things. And by going through a process like even that, as trivial as it may seem, that type of thinking is no different than building something substantive for your organization.
Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Britton, CEO of
Thank
Suzy,
you.
author. I'm Segun Oduolowu. Thank you so much for listening.
Appreciate you, Segun.